Hi, my name is Sonja Allen. I'm the Transformation Practice Lead at AJC Partners Consultancy, and I'm here with Alan Jones, Lean and Engineering Practice Lead.
Hello.
Hi, Alan. So what we do at AJC is essentially all focused on accelerating your organization's performance, whether that is from a strategic perspective, whether that's transformation programs, your operational processes. But of course, we now, as everybody around the world, are faced with, as we keep hearing, unprecedented situation through the COVID-19 pandemic, which is that work in many cases has stopped, or organizations have dropped down to an absolute minimum of work. And at some point, we will all come out of lockdown. And the question we were asking ourselves is there an opportunity to not just survive this crisis and coming out of lockdown, but to accelerate performance out of this crisis to become more successful than we were before and surpass the market? We believe there is, and we're going to take you through the model relating to it over the next few slides. Alan, are you going to kick us off?
Yes, thanks, Sonja. So, the Performance Culture Accelerator, which you can see here, has 4 elements to it. And we've been using this for some time now to help structure improvement for our clients. When we started to think about how this could be applied to the COVID-19 crisis, well, we worked out that there's a 3-phase plan to the lockdown. There's the mitigation phase as we go into lockdown, there's the planning phase out as we are in lockdown, and there's the accelerate phase as we come out of lockdown. And it's the blending of this model with the 3 phases and backed up by some fairly substantial academic research, we believe is the best way to not just come out of this crisis, not just to survive this crisis, but actually to accelerate out of lockdown and to outperform your peer group in whatever element of business undertaking you happen to be in. So we'll take you through it. Sonja, do you want to take us on to the next slide?
Exactly, and the acceleration of the peer group is very much linked to the academic research published in the book Great by Choice by Jim Collins. Now, this has been a comprehensive piece of work where over many, many years, Collins followed the performance of companies which he calls 10Xers, companies which are 10 times more successful than their direct competitors. And he wanted to understand, what is it, what makes them so different? Is it luck? Are they doing something better? Do they know something everybody else doesn't know? What are these critical enablers that make these companies so successful? And what Collins found is then, more than anything else, it is linked to 3 core behaviors of the leaders of these organizations, grouped around something what he calls level 5 ambition. So let me start explaining level 5 ambition. Level 5 ambition is ambition to do what's right. It isn't personal, but it is for the business, for the product, for the customer, for the people, for the market, for the future. It is always focusing on what the right thing to do is. Grouped around that, there are 3 critical behaviors. The first one being what Collins calls fanatic discipline. It is the discipline to follow your vision, your process, your goal and target collectively and always. You need to deploy something called productive paranoia. It's the ability to assume the worst case scenario and understand that bad luck will happen, but have a plan in place for it. It's proactively managing risk and being prepared for when the going gets tough, to respond quickly and effectively. And in order to do that, you need empirical creativity. It's the mastery of coming to our own data-driven conclusions. So typically as humans, really, when we are faced with challenge, we have a tendency to look to conventional wisdom. We have a tendency to look to our elders. We have a tendency to look to research. Collins says, in order to accelerate your company's performance, don't do that. Use data, use your own data that you created, come to data-driven conclusions, and make a plan for decisive actions based on that. Now, this model is particularly useful to be applied in what we call VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environments, such as this crisis, which is why we linked the COVID-19 response model to this research and underpinned our 3 action phases, mitigate, plan, and accelerate, to the 3 behaviors. The idea is here really to give you a comprehensive vision to not just survive, but thrive out of lockdown for the next years to come.
Yes, and for me, the importance of the level 5 ambition cannot be understated. This is the ambition which is for the greater good of the organization. It is not for personal gain or personal career development. It is what is right for the organization, which typically means what is right for the customer, what is the right thing to do. It's that that sense of doing the right thing for the greater good, which typically comes out of a crisis. We're all reasonably good people at heart, and we all demonstrate level 5 ambition at the right time when there's a crisis. And let's face it, the COVID-19 is certainly a crisis. So if ever this model had an environment where it could be widely applied, it is at the current time. So if we move on to the roadmap, the 3 phases that I mentioned earlier. Sonja, do you want to take us through the first couple of phases?
Sure. So we start, and you will probably already have done that to an extent, maybe in full, with the mitigation phase. The mitigation phase is where we deploy our productive paranoia. It's going through slowdown, and many of you will have stopped operating altogether. There were challenges around managing and planning flexible teams and working environments. There were probably a lot of communication challenges. And something you may or may not have done during the mitigation phase is to prepare for go live after lockdown. What we need to do in the mitigation phase is have some checks in place. How do we get out of this? Are we ready to go again? Which brings me to the plan phase, and where this is where we apply our empirical creativity. We use the data, we use what we learned in the mitigation phase as much as we use our inherent knowledge about our organization, our market, our processes, our customers, to analyze, and this can be done remotely, and this can be done during lockdown, the critical enablers that will help my business to accelerate out of this. How can I get going as quickly and efficiently as possible? What's my plan? There will probably be some critical change projects that we will need to do as soon as we get back, like little accelerate Kaizens to fix the things that are broken, that might have been broken before, or might have been broken through this crisis. We need to have the appropriate metrics in place. And in parallel to all of that, before I let Alan talk about the accelerate phase, we need to focus on getting our people ready to accelerate. The working world will have changed when we come back. So our leaders will need to be more agile, they will need to be focused on improvement, and they will require different skills than they needed before. Equally, our teams will require agile thinking, problem-solving thinking, and a different level of engagement than they had before. So during the mitigation and plan phases, really critically, we need to focus on what is it our people need in order to be able to accelerate. And Alan is going to take you through the accelerate now.
So when we get out of lockdown and we get back to work, we have a limited period, not quite sure how long it is, could be weeks or days, but there's a limited period when people will recognize that they are in a new and for them possibly a unique situation. Typically, this is what happens when we come out of a crisis. It won't take long before that becomes commonplace. It becomes the norm. And the ability, the acceptance of change, once we settle into normal life, is much more difficult. So we have this period right at the start of when we come out of lockdown, which we need to be able to use. And to use that, the plans that we put in place need to be implemented pretty quickly. So we need to start doing things in a different way from day one, from week one, so that very clear signals are sent out to the entire organization. The world has changed and we have changed with it. Now, this will need fairly good and robust leadership skills, which is why we have those developed during the planning phase, or developing during the planning phase. If we can get to employees during the plan phase, great. If we can't, we have to get to them when we get back out of lockdown. But certainly for management, they need to be prepared to know what it is that they need to do, which is different when they get into the accelerate phase. And there's going to be all sorts of details which need to be checked and confirmed during the accelerate phase as we start to make sure that everything is working properly. And there's a whole load of problems which need to be solved, which quite frankly will overwhelm management unless the operators and the direct employees are involved as well. Okay, so I think if we go into the plan phase now. So this is where I'll concentrate a little bit on the performance culture accelerator model. 4 elements to it: purpose, planning, process, and people. And we believe that unless these 4 areas are working together, then a company will not be able to accelerate. So the purpose is fairly clear. How clear is the purpose? But what we're looking for here is to make sure that not only is the purpose clear, but the strategic direction is also clear, so that conflicts and competitions are avoided within the organization. So there's no wasted resource taking place. And that the purpose then is deployed down into the organization. Sometimes in measures and targets, sometimes in defined characteristics, but everybody has a clear sense of what it is they need to be doing. Then there's the planning phase, the planning element rather. So how well do we plan our organization? is there a vague sense of direction, or are there highly detailed plans? And what is the correct level of detail that works in our organization? That needs to be a fairly high order. Then there's the processes. How robust and repeatable are our processes? Is every day an adventure, or do our processes run like a Swiss clock? This needs to be understood. We need to be fairly realistic about understanding where we are and where we want to be.
And this is, if I may jump in here, this might be new to some people in some sectors. Process thinking is something that we're quite used to in larger organizations, on the shop floor, but maybe not so much in, say, hospitality or retail environments, in smaller environments. Process thinking, understanding what is my process and what needs to happen to deliver my process safely, will become critical to everybody.
Yes, it's a good point. Process thinking breaks down the barriers that exist between departments or individuals. And it is the way of thinking which allows us to develop what our organization does to a high level. So it's a good point that we make there, Sonja. And then we come to people. How engaged are our people? Coming out of a crisis, we're looking for extraordinary levels of engagement. And this is not going to happen by chance, but perversely, the fact that we are in a crisis situation does motivate people to higher levels of engagement. How can we use this to the benefit of the organizational purpose? This is something which, if we don't grab the opportunity, it will pass us by. So it needs to be carefully implemented into our plans. So let's go through each one of these in detail. The purpose. So the strategic direction, is it clear? We may have the vision for long-term growth, but in the short term, what is that? It might be that, and it's likely to be, I suppose, that in a situation where we don't really understand what the new order is going to look like, that long-term targets are not going to be appropriate. We need short-term goals, probably defined monthly or weekly. And the targets that we deploy down into the organization need to be equally short-term. Once we've got the direction sorted out and we have deployed into the organization the appropriate targets and measures that we're looking for, we need to make sure that our customers, our suppliers, and our employees are all aware of where we are, what we're looking to achieve, and we need to understand where they are. The world would have changed. Are our customers still in the position to buy from us in the quantities that they bought before and of the type that they bought before? Are our suppliers able to deliver what we ordered before? Do we still need to order the same type of things from our suppliers? And are our employees able to support us in the way that they did before? Do they have concerns, for instance, about their own personal safety? And then we need to make sure that we've checked everything within our own environment as well.
And I think here's it's where the Collins model comes back in, and the empirical creativity that is required to create the purpose in this plan phase. This is where you're not just creating a vision and mission, it's more than that. It is creating the data, whether or not you're going to be able to deliver on that.
Yeah, it is. It's making sure that you understand the situation that you're entering into, so that when you rely on something, it has been checked, it has been tested, and it is reliable. And that, to me, has a degree of the fanatical discipline about it.
It does.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide.
So this brings me to the planning element. How do we accelerate our planning? So many larger organizations will have had plans. Some organizations will have basically had order fulfillment lists. Some organizations might have worked with comprehensive project plans before the crisis. But the one thing that's for sure is that coherent planning will become more critical than it has ever been, and long-term planning may not be possible for a very long time. So we will all be faced with specific challenges to cope with, which are completely unique to our business, based on all those checks. And what we need to do is to have the right planning in place to then mitigate whatever needs mitigating while driving business performance and productivity. So this means that the planning method that we use has to be agile and flexible in its term, in its response to challenge and change. It has to be bespoke to the specific requirements of our business, and it has to be communicated down to pretty much everybody who is part of our order fulfillment process in whichever way. This means that good project management skills, which is something that most businesses are notoriously bad at, suddenly become a critical capability for everybody, especially in an environment where communication as we knew it might need to be restricted to some element. I can't just pop into the kitchen and ask the chef anymore what we got on the special today, because I need to stay apart. Just as a very simple example, so we're not just talking shop floor solutions here. This means that while our plan needs to be flexible and agile in terms of dealing with the challenges of the situation, it also needs to be incredibly detailed in planning our processes and driving our productivity targets. Goal setting of delivery of these planning steps and management control of the existing processes will need to be efficient. And what we have might not be efficient enough anymore. It might not give us the right level of detail anymore. So
I'll talk more about that in the next slide, which is to do with the process, because we are now looking at a situation where whatever the process was before we went into lockdown, as we come back into it, social distancing is going to be a reality. This means that how we communicated before is probably no longer going to be possible. And we need to have different ways, or accept that communication is going to be a lot more difficult. In terms of the processes that we are managing, our solutions are going to be less process specific and more example specific. For instance, we've seen examples in retail of markings on the floor, of visuals, signage going up, so that we can maintain social 2 meters, 3 meters social distancing. These are techniques taken out of manufacturing, which were taken no doubt from other industries historically. So the solutions that we need will be bespoke to the situation we find ourselves in. Now, As we come out of lockdown and we get into repopulating our processes, we are going to be overwhelmed with a myriad of minor problems which need to be solved. How do I pass my work from one person to another? How do I communicate from one person to another? What is my environment like? What level of PPE do I already wear to do my task that I'm allocated? All of these things need to be considered and the right solutions put in place then, which allow us to do our task in a way that does not compromise productivity, but at the same time keeps us all safe and allows us to deliver even higher levels of customer satisfaction than we wanted before. So the need for visualized standards at each area of the process or a workstation becomes fairly significant. Roles and responsibilities need to be clarified to the point where communication is no longer necessary in order to do the tasks that we need to do. So the level of problem solving is fairly significant. And the engagement of people who work in those workstations is critical to the success, because they will be the best ones who will solve the problems. Management will simply be overwhelmed if we try to solve all the problems through the traditional management channels. We have to engage the people to help us here.
Which means we have a completely different set of demands on our people, and the roles and responsibilities of the individuals working within our processes will have changed to what they were before. This means we can't just come back to work and start business as usual. We need to redefine all these elements in order to accelerate performance. And the best way of doing that is by really understanding the impact this will have on the people operating in the business, and adjacent to it, our customers. It's key facts, right? The working world may have changed forever. There will be more working from home. There will be, as Alan just described, social distancing challenges to deal with. There will be different challenges to both leaders and the teams. Any shop floor work or customer-facing work, or even work in an office where we sit together, will have to follow completely new and higher health and safety standards than we ever had. Whereas on the other hand, half of the business's population might be working from home. So there's a real chance for a division to be created within the organization. It will be critical for managers to be able to engage and motivate the workforce through these challenging environments, through this drastic change that we will be dealing with for a period of time. So that means that weak management skills will be exposed really quickly, and many conventional management skills will need enhancing. What was good before the crisis will not be good enough after the crisis in many cases. So what do we need to do? We need to engage everyone. And this is where we're then starting to talk about culture. We don't just need to engage our people. We don't just need to inform them and train them. We need to create a culture of growth where we bring our customers, suppliers, and partners on the way together with our team. And we're all fully supportive of our growth plan. Each individual in our organization will have to be more vigilant, more diligent more flexible, more agile, more focused on problem solving at an individual level than they ever had to be before, which is why I think the best way of describing this is we're not just talking about engagement, we are talking about developing a level 5 culture linking to this level 5 ambition Collins describes in his model, a culture of doing the right thing at all times for the product, the business, for everyone. And that must become part of our DNA as a business. We must walk the level 5 culture, and most importantly, we must talk the level 5 culture with our team, which is why good acoustic management skills will become a critical competency for everyone.
Yes. So that's the four elements of the accelerator model and how we think they will work. So I think it's worth now summarizing what we've tried to set out in this short video. COVID-19 has put the world into an unprecedented situation. But our response can be based on academic rigor and can be using an approach, tools and techniques which we know and understand. The combination of the AJC accelerator model and the behaviors as recommended by Collins can be applied in almost every environment. We've struggled to think of environments where they cannot be applied. So we believe that that offers the great flexibility that is required. The main changes that are required are not in hardware, they are not in high tech, they are not in high cost solutions. They are in areas which are relatively quick and low cost to change, and that is in the way we manage, in the way we communicate, in the way we organize at a very local level the workplace that we find ourselves in. Work towards building this can start during lockdown. It can start with remote contact. But what is required as we accelerate out of lockdown is the adoption of this fanatical discipline. Because if we are going to deliver what we have planned, then we need to have that adherence to the standard that we have set ourselves. Nothing else will be good enough. And that particular point cannot be overemphasized. But we believe that the rewards that this approach will deliver will make it worthwhile.
Right.
So, how can we help you? Sonja, do you want to take that?
Yes, so first and foremost, this is the first of a series of vlogs we're going to do on the COVID-19 topics. So if you sign up to our YouTube channel, we're going to, over the coming weeks, release more vlogs where we deep dive into the different elements of the model, how that can help you, and we'll also look at different working environments in more detail. Following on from each series of vlogs, we will do a series of Q&A Zooms in May and potentially June. Join us, send us your questions. We're going to spend some time, apologies, this is live recording. We're going to spend some time and answering all your questions around the model. Or of course, if you are looking for a bespoke solution for your business and your very own COVID-19 acceleration plan, then get in touch with us, and one of our AJC experts or several of us, depending on what your requirement is, will help you build your own individual business response and acceleration plan. I think that's it from us. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you very much. Look forward to being in contact.
Thanks.